everyone. Welcome to Her Talk with Tai Vicari. I am your host, Tai Vicari, and I thank you all for tuning in this evening. I have 3 really special guests that are coming on the show, and we will be speaking about mental illness, education with mental illness, and as well as suicide prevention. Now, each one of the people that are going to be on the show have a different perspective, and it's relatable. They all have the commonality, but the different perspective on ways to help individuals that are either suffering from mental illness or to help prevent it or see the signs of mental illness, and how you can be proactive as individuals, as family members, and as just a community. I would like for every single one of you that are watching this evening to please share this information out there, because you never know what's going on in someone's life, what's going on in their heart or in their mind, and you're that one person that was able to give them the information that they needed. I'm usually, and I know you guys are like, wow, Tai, you're super serious. But to me, this is a serious subject, and I definitely want to approach it with every single one of you out there, because our society really needs the help. We really have so many people that are just suffering, and it's up to us as individuals, as a community, to join together and help each other out. And if you become a resource to someone, you become that one. And the one philosophy, and I know some of my friends out there are like, oh, you're preaching the one philosophy. But the one philosophy is when you can help an individual without asking for anything in return. And you never know. It could be as simple as a smile can turn any situation around. So just try and be that one person. And so I'm going to get to my first guest, which is Michele Loesch. And she is a functional medicine practitioner and a health coach. And we're going to be talking today. And I'm going to introduce Michele. Hi, Michele.
Hi,
welcome
Tai.
to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. Now, we sat together a little over a week ago, and we were speaking about what you do for people and your involvement in the school districts on Long Island, and also you were recently at Stony Brook University presenting and about wellness, about what's going into your body and how it affects you physically and mentally. So thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So basically what I like to do with my clients is, the goal purpose is truly to find out what the root cause is for what's going on in the body. So that could be emotionally, it could be physically. Most of the times it's what we feel. We feel aches and pains, we have headaches, we can have anxiety, we can have depression. And over time, when there's symptoms in our body that we're not paying attention to, and we don't pay attention until we just can't take it anymore. And when we don't feel well, we're not doing the things such as eating well, exercising, being more mindful, getting outside. We tend to get into a little bit of a self-medicating arena, where it could be food, or it could be alcohol, or cigarette smoking. So my passion runs in many different arenas, and everyone says, well, what is your niche? And I'm going to be 50, so women in my age group, yes. The elders, yes, because unfortunately that population too is suffering from depression, because they have a lot of diseases going on, and they don't want to get older. They feel ill. But on the flip side, we also have our youth. And that's been for some reason driving me to that group. They're our future, and we see a lot of mental health problems with that group of individuals, including college students. And having children in college and in the high school, we see the stresses from both ends, girls and boys, because I have one of each, so I'm able to kind of get insight and step back and see what's going on in both both of their lives, and it's just interesting to see, not interesting, the stress level. The statistic not too long ago for college students was 2 out of 3 are depressed, anxious, or taking drugs or alcohol, and that's very sad. So the stress level is beyond what they can handle at the young age, and then we just somehow manage it and take it and into our adulthood, and then we become ill.
So I want to touch point on the school age. So I noticed through time period, because I'm close to your age, and I recall that when I went to school, there wasn't so much pressure on us when it came to test taking, and I noticed that in the public school system, and I say the public school system because of the fact that I came from the public school system. My children came from the private school system, so I kind of know both, areas. And as my older one, he went into a public school at, at the higher education level. And so I know that there's a different, way of learning, a way of teaching. And I did also notice that the emphasis on them, you have to pass this test, you have this test, and then the stress level and the homework and and all these different anxieties that are put on our children, and causing them to become depressed. And then our children, I know my one son, he's 22 now. When he went into kindergarten, that first week of kindergarten, he was the class that 9/11 happened. So our children are dealing with 9/11. They're dealing with a high suicide rate. The suicide rate is higher now than it was when we were growing up, or at least we didn't know about it as much. I'll say that to be fair. Okay. So what are your thoughts on that with because I know you're about the wellness and well-being of the person, but they're dealing with these stress levels. What are some ways that they can, take it down where they can try to level out?
Right. So I think in with our society, the big P is the problem, and the P word is perfection. We're looking for the perfect diet, and I don't like using that word diet. It may be, but that's the word. We're looking for the perfect diet. What I hear with the girls is, the perfect workout, the best way to get here, quickly, but everything is perfection. And for these kids, it's one of the hardest things not to be. So, anxiety and stress can come. I know a lot of these kids, they get up early, they're off to class at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. They're not getting, one of the biggest things is they're not getting the quality of sleep and the amount of sleep that they need. And not because they're choosing not to go to sleep. There is a biological reason why their bodies cannot shut down after a certain time. And hence they want to sleep later, but they can't. They're at school at 7 a.m. So they're not eating breakfast. They're waking up already dehydrated. They're waking up, you're fasting pretty much through the night. Most, if you're sleeping, you're fasting basically. And they're waking up and their blood sugar is going to be low. And then the first thing they grab for is that Dunkin' Donuts full sugared coffee, maybe a bagel in the cafeteria. And then who knows what they're eating at lunch. They may be able to get off someplace to get food before a sport, and then they're playing sports. And lack of food, lack of nutrition, lack of sleep. I mean, these are the things that are adding or maybe leading up to giving them higher levels of stress. So, it's creating those good habits, and it's hard. I mean, we're working parents. We're out of the house. It's full time. How do we do this as a family? I mean, that's where it really has to begin, I think. And having the schools need to give a little bit more in the morning as far as easing them into their day, just a little bit, making sure that they have these breakfasts at hand. But the nutrition component, because their blood sugar is low. What happens when your blood sugar you feel shaky, you feel anxious, you can't make decisions correctly.
You're sluggish.
You're sluggish, you're tired, you're yawning. And I've given lectures in high school classes, and I want to walk around the classroom and knock every one of them in the back of the head, because what are they doing? They're nodding off. they're nodding off. They can't sit up, they can't focus. And this is, second period up until eighth period. I don't know if I saw a live alert class, because they're constantly feeling like they're exhausted. But nutrition, the food we eat is information for the body. It's information for the cells. It's information for us to be able to be alert. It's so important to see it that way. So if we're eating crap food, we're going to feel like crap. Mm-hmm. If we're eating foods that are high in sugar, foods that have food dye in it, Europe has warning labels on foods with food dye. Here in the United States, it doesn't. Causes anxiety and anxiousness, hyperactivity in children. And we're feeding them Go-Gurts and things with lots of color and chemicals, and that creates an internal stress on the body. So you have, not only do you have external stress coming from our world of being perfect, our world of getting everything done and getting into that college and doing everything we need to do 110%, or else we feel like we're a failure. We've got to worry about the internal environment and how we can nourish that so that we can be calm and focused and on point with sports or a test. Eating foods that are high, salmon and fish that are high in omega-3, fatty fish oils, is food for the brain. Studies have shown, there was a study on boys, I don't know, they didn't do one on girls, but there was a study on boys that they ate fish the night before and improved their grades the following day. It's not something the body stores, it's not something the body will hold on to for weeks down the road, which means we need it daily.
So we have to constantly replenish.
We constantly have to replenish. So if, as an adult, as a kid, as a teen, I got this presentation the next day, or I have a test the next day, let's get some good omega-3s into our dinner tonight.
Now, so eating the right way, can that help with mental wellness?
It can, because sugar, first of all, will increase your depression level. It causes depression. Excessive amounts of sugar cause depression. If you look at the standard American diet, and a lot of the foods have high fructose corn, a lot of the packaged stuff, high fructose corn syrup has shown to have high levels of mercury. So if we're eating something with high fructose corn syrup multiple times a week, now we're also giving our bodies toxins that are causing this anxiousness that's crossing the blood-brain barrier and making us feel foggy, feel tired, feel anxious. So omega-3s also help with depression and can ground us and make us feel better. So there's a lot of ways that the body can naturally help balance itself if we help it along. It's a very smart machine, and it will take all those nutrients, those good nutrients that you put into your body, and use that for information from our toes to our brain, because our emotions and our physical state, what you feel, are all one. Our body is one whole piece. So just to say this person is anxious and has depression, but not, and it's we have stress, and that's why we can't handle stuff. Mm-hmm. But what else? There's more to it.
Yes.
There's more there that we can, it's like peeling the Lay's, getting down to the nitty gritty. One of my clients said, if my granddaughter tells me I got to watch Shrek one more time, and there's a clip in there where he talks about the onion.
Yes,
and I'm like,
the onions.
We need to peel the onion back and really see where this is coming from. Not to put blame on anything, but just to see, where can we help the body become balanced with good nutrition, with a walk out in Mother Nature, with mindfulness and focusing on the breath. That is one of the lectures I give at the high school, and it's strange for kids to hear it at first. They think of meditation, they think you got to sit, all this, and it truly isn't. I mean, it's just really trying to take that deep breath, because that's another thing that causes us to feel anxious is when when you don't have oxygen, you feel anxious. Just think if you're at the bottom of a pool and you couldn't get up, you'd be anxious. There's no oxygen, right? You can't breathe.
I'm learning how to breathe, because I know that I was a kid that had asthma, and I actually I haven't had an asthma attack in years, and I'll tell you why, because I learned how to breathe again. When we're born, and this was what my doctor had told me, when you're born, you know how to breathe, and for some reason, you forget. and so breathing is super important. I do that at night. So I do it at night to calm down because I'm just like,
you have to focus on that. As soon as you focus on that, it makes a huge improvement.
So if someone wanted you to come to their school or come to their organization, you know, right now we have our lower thirds on the screen showing your information and everything, but you can bring programs to these individuals. Is that accurate?
Well, what I do is I give a full presentation. So I've been doing them in the health schools, in the health room classes. So this way they understand what mindfulness is, what breath is, and it comes off the tail end of usually their stress section of their health class. And so I can, you know, give those presentations and offer any assistance that they might need, just to get the kids to relate a little bit. It's kind of difficult for them sometimes to relate to that.
Well, it's a different mindset.
It's a different mindset. But, you know, when I explain to them, well, you're being mindful, you're in that moment, to understand for them to be in that moment, is I usually relate to whether they play an instrument on stage for dance, kicking the soccer ball into the goal for the championship win. I said, you're present at that moment. You hear nothing else. You see nothing else. You just know that that is the one thing that you need to accomplish at that moment. And that's being present. You know, so, and then trying to understand how food plays a role in that presence, and how, you know, sleep plays a role in that presence. And no matter what pair of cleats or what dance shoes you buy, and they're the most expensive, and it's not going to get you anywhere if the rest of you as a whole is not functioning the way it should.
So if you have something to say to the audience, you know, I told you where to look earlier,
yes.
So just give your message.
I guess my message is to think about the body as a whole, to don't take no for an answer that maybe you're not feeling well for a certain reason. You might feel it mentally, but physically and inside, internally, that internal environment might be struggling for a different reason, and it could just be getting to that root cause to help that problem, and then seeking out the next individual if that's not it. And it's peeling the layers back. So not to feel, I want people to live and thrive instead of just getting from point A to point B in a cloud every day of their life, like thinking and hoping for the next day to come because we want this day to be done. We want to feel well as 90% of the time as we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Michele, for coming on the show this evening. I really appreciate it, and the audience really appreciates it. Now, hi, you guys out there. If you want to get in contact with Michele, her information is on the screen. She can come to your school. She can come to your organization. And now we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have Marianne, Chasen on, and we'll be right back.
No worries, got no woes, feeling happy to the tips of my toes.
Her Talk with Tai Vicari. This is like a great evening for me because I'm able to speak with three women who are extremely knowledgeable about mental illness, suicide prevention, and how an individual can actually prosper with the right tools and resources, and as individuals and as a community, how we can join together. So tonight, if you are watching, I do ask that you like, share, subscribe, and get the word out about this show and the resources that are on here, and spreading the word about the three ladies that are here tonight. So my next guest is Marianne Chasen, and she is the CEO and principal of Spark Elementary School in Lindenhurst. So welcome, Marianne. How are you?
Hello, so good to see you.
Thank you, thank you. So you have an amazing school. I did the walkthrough at your school a couple of times now, and I have to say, the first time I went to the school, it was so peaceful. And I say that because I don't think people realize that when you, like in the morning time, and I remember with my younger one, he was kicking and screaming the whole time, and there was just such chaos. And even with the, that school, the way it was chaotic. But when you go to your school, you have the oil infused, the infusion going, and it's just like so calm, and everyone is, and they have, and it's structured.
Yes, there is a lot of structure, and there's also an element of chaos. Like we get the crying babies, but I think part of the difference is I love that as part of childhood. We're not afraid of it. There is an embrace of these little human beings are going to have a lot of big feelings in our hallways. And 3-year-olds leaving their moms are going to be panicked.
Yes.
And we're not afraid of that. We understand that, and we embrace it, and we are patient with it, and then it begins to transform. And I think a big piece, I know we're talking about mental health today, that we right now have this idea about good feelings, bad feelings. So being happy, being peaceful, being excited, they're in the good column. Being angry, being sad, being devastated, they're in the bad column, and we've got to rush out of them. Versus really begin to become emotionally literate in what the feelings we have as human beings on a day-to-day basis, and understanding that feelings move, and they can move along with the proper guidance in the way we think about things. So our thoughts, our feelings, working together with the guidance of a philosophy that says you are loved exactly as you are in this moment and beyond, because you're human and you're here, and we have a commitment to each other. It's a relationship. And that's really the foundation of Spark Elementary. And it's interesting because I'm a creative arts therapist. So I've been in the field of child development now, it's 35 years. Spark, I've taken over, it's the last 8 years that we've decided to go into education really as a preventative measure. If we start to teach children young, our little cutie pies, if we start to set that foundation of what it means to experience a range of situations, a range of conflicts. Childhood, we all want it to be happy. Part of the happy is that children are evolving and they're hitting crises all the time, one after another. It's part of growth, right? We just had our butterflies come out of their cocoon. So our kindergartners raise these butterflies, and we're watching this butterfly break out of the cocoon, and the amount of resilience it took for that butterfly to get out of that coating, I'm like, look how hard it is to become a butterfly. Like, these things aren't easy. This is not an easy process. And where does the resiliency come from? Where does that inner resiliency come from that says, oh, this is supposed to be hard. Yeah, I've got to really work this and be uncomfortable. Doesn't make me crazy. Doesn't make me less. I'm actually growing. I'm actually growing. How exciting. We're going to get to celebrate this soon.
Now, you have your teachers that are there, they have empathy training, or is that for both teacher and student?
We're across the board. So our students have an empathy training class once a week. And that's something, again, we're talking about this idea, kids grow with consistency. So you can't give them a mindful minute once a day and expect them to learn the techniques of mindfulness. Our kids on the hour have a mindfulness break that's built into their schedule. Every 50 minutes, instruction stops, reflection on what they learned, what was hard, how they're feeling, reading their bodies, their minds, their souls, and then learning a mindfulness technique, and then it's on to the next period. Empathy comes once a week. And empathy training, it's not, this is something I learned. It was my discovery this year. So we kind of think of empathy as a one-size-fits-all. It's really helping the child to understand someone else's perspective, stand in someone else's shoes, feel what their actions may have as an impact on someone else. So I'm doing this training, and I'm using the 3 little pigs as an example. And we're talking about the pigs and the wolf. And at the end of the story, I said, so what do you think about these pigs? Oh, they must have been terrified. They were so scared. How scary, this wolf. They were just trying to be safe. I said, what did you think about the wolf? They're like, he was horrible, he's mean, he was so angry. I'm like, well, do you think he might have also been hungry? They were like, yeah. And I'm like, do wolves eat pigs? Like, is that something that a wolf would eat? Oh. They're like, oh, the wolf was hungry. So I said, so what do you think those pigs could have done differently besides boil up the wolf? They're like, oh, we know. The pig should have invited the wolves in for dinner, sit at the table. They could have all shared their food. I'm like, no, you don't invite a wolf into dinner if you're a pig. Like, that's crazy. You'll get eaten up. Maybe they could have all been in their same safe house, just not hate the wolf for wanting to eat them. Maybe there could have been some, I don't know, a food kitchen for the wolf down the road.
Grub up some food.
Yes, but that to me said, for the sensitive, for the more naturally empathetic child, the creative sensitive who automatically goes to the feelings of someone else, gives up themselves. It's about how, I don't want to hurt your feelings. That child needs a different empathy training than the child who doesn't think about your feelings and is only thinking about their own. And the creative sensitive child really needs more practice at boundary setting. And not feeling guilty about taking care of themselves and learning self-care. So, again, with any of the buzzwords right now, if we are going to put it into practice, we all have to be very mindful about not trying to tie up the box in a nice little bow and say, we've done it. We need to listen. We need to really, really listen. Sound the alarms in the back. Listen to your children. If you do nothing else, listen, because they will tell us exactly what they need.
And their body language also. Like I know that some people they push their, you know, they're busy. They're busy. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And as a principal, as a teacher, the children come in. Do you ever notice like body language, and you know you can read it, and you can tell when a child is all right? This may not be a very good day, and something's up. So, and what are your steps then?
You know, Tai, that is such an important point, because our children do wear their hearts on their sleeves. And our partner in the business, Rosalie, who's also my sister, she's our curriculum director. She will see a child in the hallway, and she's an intuit. She's just one of those empathetic people. And she'll say, "What's going on? What's happening? I see it on you." And the child will say, "Oh, I had a bad morning with my mom and my younger brother, and I got in trouble." And right then and there, the heart-to-heart starts to happen. The way that children come to my table, so as the principal, our main premise for solving problems, if they're sent to the principal's office, it's not something they fear at all. It's we are sitting down and having a heart-to-heart. Now, what does that mean? That means that all problem solving starts with an intention to understand what's happening in the child's heart. It's grounded in love. Like, love is something we need to talk about in schools, in offices, in hospitals, any place that people are gathered together and trying to learn, grow, heal, evolve. Love needs to be at the center. And the heart-to-heart really starts with, tell me what's on your heart. Tell me what's happening. Tell me what's just happened. And a big part of my job is listening and giving them the space to simply be heard. I hear you. I see you. I'm starting to understand what went on.
You allow them to matter. And I think that that's important.
How do human beings feel like they matter, right? Any of us. And all of us have that child in us, right? We never, get rid of that place. But if we can, in the formative years, the first 10 years, when that brain is really developing, create neural pathways that trust connection, that allow children to have an understanding of who they are different from someone else. Oh, I'm someone who really does need to eat every 2 hours. Or I'm somebody who I need to go out and get fresh air and run around that playground in order to restore. Because we're all individuals, right? Everybody has a different ideal plan for a way in which we thrive. We live in the inspired realm where we feel like, oh, I could do more. I want to do more. I can take it on.
Now, how are your students developing? I know that you said that you've been doing this for 8 years. So you have some students that have been with you from the beginning, because you go up to 5th grade.
Yes.
And so, and preschool. So preschool to 5th grade is and all in between.
Yeah, right, from 3 to basically 10 years old.
And so do you see, the difference in development if a child comes in and let's say they don't start at preschool, but they start with you in the 3rd grade?
Right.
So, do you see a difference academically, or do you see a difference behaviorally, like in a child that starts in the middle?
Yes, there's definitely a difference, because it is a process where the children who are with us from the start, they're growing into a potential strength, mind, body, and soul of who they are as a learner, right? So they're developing that, and they become leaders for themselves, leaders in the community. Our children who come to us later in the process, we're beginning to do some repair work there. And that's just what parents say to me when they come in for their interview and intake. usually with our younger children, parents over and over, and it's how we got the name, would say to me, I just don't want my child to lose that spark of learning, of curiosity. Interesting, curiosity comes up a lot. Our children who are in the older grades, the parents say, I feel like my child's lost their spark. Something's been deadened in them. Can you help them get it back? So one is more of a restorative process. Can we restore that spark that people are talking about, which is really life force that parents see, connected to a sense of being able to take a risk, right? Curiosity is not being afraid to ask the questions. Why? What? Oh, discovery. And that takes a content in which a child feels safe. So the children who are with us earlier are much more secure, much more willing to take risks as learners, and much more able to begin to have a voice as a leader. And the children who come later, we work them in, but it is the community that can hold them and the culture that helps to assimilate any kind of learner, really any kind of learner.
So I noticed that, the couple of times that I had, visited the school, I noticed that there's a lot of hands-on learning, and I appreciate that because, so many, and there is a difference. There is a true difference between the regular public school curriculum, and I know that they're saying that some of the teachers are trying to, do it a little bit differently because they see a better result when they allow the children to actually learn and engage and touch and feel and ask the questions instead of telling them answers because you're driving them to take a test. So I do notice that going to your school, and I said this a couple of times already, had I had known about your school, instead of sending my younger one to, the Catholic school that I sent him to, I would have sent him to your school because I think that would have been a better place for him. But, but you live and you learn. So,
yes.
So this, if you have anything that you would like to tell the audience, so this is that time. So if you wanted to, let them know.
You know what? I do want to touch on, because the topic today is mental health, right? And one of the things that we do is we're really looking to promote this idea of neurodiversity. And we teach children that word, which means there are all kinds of brains. And everybody learns differently. Every brain has its genius, has its strength, and every brain has a challenge. And we now, even children who come to us, who come with the diagnoses of ADHD, autism, anxiety, we destigmatize it. We know about it, we name it, the children know it. Yeah, I have ADHD. It's difficult for me to sit still. Now, when parents heard that we're just going to be very open in our community about this, what was the first thing they said to us? We don't want them to use that label as a crutch. We're like, nope, it's not a crutch. It's about understanding how their brain works, and then also knowing what they need to sustain a sense of attention to be able to learn, right? So our ADD kids will say, you know what? I really need my squishy on my desk, or my fidget, or a walk. The child who is anxious can read that and say, I've got to take these breaths. They're starting to take personal responsibility for who they are, and no stigma attached to it. We did this whole campaign, and it was called Label Me Kind, Label Me Brave, Label Me Human. And we took every one of our kids and had them reflect and write on this. When has there been a time where you've been kind or someone's been kind to you? When was there a time, bravery being, where you were scared to do something, you had to push through, where you didn't think you could do this challenge, but you stuck with it, when you were uncomfortable but knew that it was something that you needed to endure? And when was there a time when you were human? When you made a mistake, when you felt like a failure, when you were down on yourself, when you had doubts. So it becomes part of normalizing a sense of the range of what it means to be a fully embodied learner. And that goes back to your hands-on. They need to be embodied. They're not learning from the head up and then go to the right brain or the left brain. The full human being, the more that becomes their norm, the less likely they will in the future be subject to giving over to algorithms that are going to tell them who they are.
So we are out of time right now for this segment.
You're like, she better stop soon.
So I want to, guys, stick around because we do have our last segment of the show that we have. Ann Morrison will be coming on. Thank you, Marianne, for coming on.
Tai.
And if you guys want to learn more about Spark Elementary, go to sparkelementary.com and visit them on May 18th for their open house in Lindenhurst. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Stick around. We're going for a commercial break.
I got no worries, got no woes. Feeling happy to the tips of my toes.
And we're back with Her Talk with Tai Vicari. This has been a wonderful evening. And, we just had Marianne on. Before that, we had Michele, and they each brought to the table, mindfulness, breathing, health, and what you consume in your body and what you consume in your mind and how that affects your mental well-being. And now I'm going to turn to Ann Morrison, who is my last guest for the evening, and she is the area director for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming
you.
on. So it's a serious conversation, but it's a necessary conversation. And I know that I spoke to some people throughout the last 2 weeks, and I had mentioned that I'm going to be talking about this because I had a cousin who,
Died by suicide?
died from suicide. I had my stepfather died from suicide, and a friend, in the past, it'll be a year anniversary soon, died from suicide, and this is. I want to say it's kind of seems like it's trending. It's a horrible thing to say, but what can we do? Like, are there signs? Like, please walk me through.
So the reason that you feel like it's trending is because people are now acknowledging that people are dying by suicide. So that is actually positive because the rates have been increasing steadily over the last 2 decades or so. So it is a higher rate than past, but people never talked about it before. So it's been happening for many, many, many years, but it was always a stigma associated with it. There was a shame associated with it, so people didn't talk about it. So there were many people who died by suicide, and families just didn't tell people what had happened. It was always the big kept secret. So now you're hearing more and more about it because people are talking about it. And that's a good thing. Not that people are dying, but that people are talking about it. Part of the reason that that's happening is because we've had some high-profile deaths in some celebrities who have, and it's brought an awareness to the general public that this is a problem that affects everybody. There's no, from young people to old people to black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. Across the board, it's a mental health issue. And it's exciting that people are starting to finally pay attention and talk about it and say, this is a problem, what can we do? So that's where the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has come in. We are a national organization. I am the director on Long Island. We have chapters in all 50 states. And one of the things that we work very closely with in communities is really education and training and in the outreach and support. So we want to teach people what mental health looks like, what mental illness looks like, and signs and things to look for and how they can help someone.
So now we talk about signs and things to look for, and I know that, you know, the younger population, I'm hearing more and more of younger people, you know, dying from
It's the
suicide.
second leading cause of death for young people between the ages of 10 and 24.
And isn't that mind-blowing?
Yeah, it is. And as a mother of 4 sons, I never really thought about their mental health growing up, and I should have. Like now, I'm ashamed of the fact that I never thought about their mental health. I really should have. And we need to become a society where we understand that our mental health is just as important as our physical health.
Absolutely.
And treat it the same way. So we need to teach young people, and you know, listening to Marianne, it really is important to teach young people, to teach our children at a young age, to recognize mindfulness and mental health, and not be afraid to reach out for help when they're not feeling okay, and erasing the stigma of feeling weak or there's something wrong with you if you do reach out for help.
Now, I know that, you know, in the mental health community, you have individuals that are diagnosed, and then you have individuals that are not diagnosed. Yes. You have individuals that are dually diagnosed, so they'll have multiple different types of mental disabilities. And I'm going to talk about my stepfather and what had happened with him. He suffered from depression for many years, and then he turned, of course, to drugs and alcohol to suppress his pains and his anxieties within, in and out of treatment centers and everything. What caused, or what they say, and I don't know how true this is that it was a chemical reaction between doing whatever drug he was on at that moment and taking a prescription. So he was given a prescription to not do drugs, and I guess that broke him. And I say that it broke him. So sometimes it's a chemical imbalance, and then whatever you're intaking
and that's absolutely true.
Messes you up.
We do know that mental health issues are a chemical imbalance. I mean, that's been research has shown. If you look at the brains of somebody who suffers from depression and somebody who doesn't, there's absolutely a difference. And yes, there are sometimes that there's different treatments and medications to try to battle that depression, that you need to be aware of the different reactions that it might have. So what a drug that may work on one person may not work on another. So, you know, it's not an exact science of what's going to help somebody treat that depression. So
now they're doing testing on whether or not you have an allergy to prescriptions. Now that's the new thing. It's believe it or not, it's in other countries, but it just hasn't made its way here yet. So, well, it's made its way here, but it's not in New York State yet. It's actually in other states. I only bring that up because, to me, I think that's super important. For people outside this state, you know what, you might be allergic to something, and then that may cause, you know, an even bigger problem.
And that's why it's so important to teach people some of the subtle things to look for in somebody who might be coming to a mental health crisis and think about taking their own life. And not that it's always so recognizable. A lot of the things to look for are very, very subtle. But it's knowing somebody, some of the way they're speaking, just casually putting out, I don't want to be a burden to people anymore. I'm not sure if I want to live anymore. I mean, some of that may sound very, that doesn't sound right.
But what about the people that oh, what do you mean they died from suicide? What do you mean they were so happy,
yes.
they had everything they needed,
Yes.
they looked so perfect
Yes.
all the time. How can you tell that
Again,
person?
a lot of the times it's very subtle. It's sometimes just knowing a person and knowing some changes in behavior. If they start withdrawing from activities they would normally like, if they start isolating themselves a little bit more, if they start turning to drugs and alcohol a little bit more, a sign that something might not be right. There's something different about their behaviors. But there are people who are very good at hiding what it is they're feeling. So one of the other important things that we try to teach just society, people in general, is, again, not being afraid to ask for help when you're feeling that crisis. So you have been hiding it and nobody really has noticed these subtle changes, but reaching out for help when you need it, erasing that stigma that there's something wrong with you, you're weak, or you're not handling life correctly if you need that help, and teaching people to try to be aware of those subtle changes. And if you suspect on any level that somebody might be in a mental health crisis, to assume that you're the only person that's going to reach out. Don't assume that somebody else is noticing it also. Have a conversation. And it sounds really simple, but one of our training programs we give the community is called Talk Saves Lives, because it can be as simple as that. Have a conversation, an open, honest conversation with somebody. I've noticed that you don't seem to be having lunch with us each day. You seem to be withdrawing. I've noticed, is there something going on with you? Really asking them that having that uncomfortable conversation.
And that's, I don't know if you know, but I'm out in the world a lot and I speak to a lot of people because that's what I do. I'm a networker and a media person. And when I ask someone how they're doing, I really want to know.
Yes. And so having that open, honest conversation and letting that person know you do really want to know, making them feel comfortable to open up to you. And if they don't right away, some people won't, they may be guarded. If you continue to notice these things that are still bothering you, ask again. Don't be afraid to have that uncomfortable conversation. We partnered with, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention partnered with the JED Foundation, and they created a national PSA campaign called Seize the Awkward. I think it's brilliant. It's used YouTube stars to talking, the audience was young people, and really fun little snippets of information on how to have that awkward conversation, how to approach your friend, to ask them if everything's all right, and giving them, there's a whole drop-down menu, giving them little tips on how to start the conversation, what happens if they do open up to you, giving them numbers and resources on where they might be able to call to get help. But really, it is an awkward conversation sometimes, but it has to be had.
It definitely has to be had. So you mentioned 10-year-olds before, and so that probably stems from a child having some type of mental disability, and or how can you tell in a 10-year-old? I know that I was talking earlier before you guys came, before we were on air and everything, I was talking about how one of my friends, when we were younger, his parents put him on Ritalin. And it just changed his persona completely. And that was back then where it was like, put them on drugs, put them on drugs and everything. And which turned out to, affect him as an adult as well. But, parents, not just parents, but people in general, they're so quick to, here, take this pill. Take that,
We know that if, again, we talked before that a mental health condition isn't an imbalance in the brain. So there are children as young as 5 who can suffer from depression. And one of the statistics that blows my mind is that We know that 90% of people who die by suicide had suffered from some sort of mental health condition that was either undiagnosed or not being treated properly. But only 2 out of 5 people who suffer from depression actually seek treatment. That's a big problem. People need to seek the treatment, mental health treatment, that if they're suffering from depression, anxiety, any mental health condition. So one of the things that we are also working on doing is teaching parents and working with doctors and pediatricians on how to diagnose a mental health condition in a young patient. Because we know that if we can diagnose that they're suffering from depression when they're 10, we can, sometimes it's not always drugs, it could just be some sort of therapy, or even just teaching them different coping mechanisms to handle certain stressors that make them anxious. Or so it's really at a young age teaching them, because life is hard. I mean, there are times that things happen that children need to learn how to handle that. You know, I think Marianne said it, you know, when she's teaching in her school. Yeah, there's good days and there's bad days, but you need to arm children, adults, anybody with the tools to handle that stress so that it doesn't become a crisis.
It's sometimes difficult. Now, you mentioned, you know, you're dealing with the doctors and my son, my younger son, not my older son, so my kids are 8 years apart. So when my older son was going to a pediatrician, they never asked him what they're asking my younger son. He actually fills out a form.
Yes.
And it's all these questions.
And that's progress. That's terrific.
And I think that is. And I was like, wow, what are all these questions? And then it was like, Mom, he has to answer them. Yeah. So, you know, which is good, because I think that, you know, and this is, again, I always tell people, it's opinion, you know, because I get like blasted. But I feel that as parents, sometimes, you know, at least the older school parents, we'll say it that, old school parents, we tell them, you know, stop complaining. You know, we have that, like, oh, you know, quit your whining, this and that.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, suck it up. You know, things like that, like all those things. Because I remember that was like, oh, come on, you know, you're fine. You know, things like that. And it's like, no, I'm not fine. And it's okay not to be fine.
Yes.
And I think that people need to know that.
And
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay not to be okay. And that's what we try to teach the kid. It's okay not to be okay. But learn how to reach out, whether it's to your parent, to a trusted adult, to a teacher, a coach, somebody, to say, I'm not okay. Something's not right. And sometimes in young people, they don't know how to identify or even verbalize what it is that's not right, but they just know that something's not right. So we also go into classrooms and try to teach kids what to look for in their friends, and understand that they also should be reaching out if they're worried about their friend. To a teacher, to an adult, to a parent, somebody, not to be afraid. Someone. Right. And we also know many times young people will confide in their friends. So if your friend confides in you that they're having suicidal thoughts, tell an adult. Don't keep that secret.
It's very hard for with the social media and what the kids are going through and the bullying and there's so many different variables, you know, between mental illness, between, you know, having depression from or having PTSD from an incident, because of course, you know, we are on Long Island and we had children that were affected by Sandy, and we had children that are affected by fires and different things. So there's all these different variables that are going, I think, that are going on around here. We have on the screen, you know, throughout this, you know, our time talking, the phone number to call and how to, you know, get in contact with someone. And you have trained people on the other side of that phone.
Well, we don't handle we don't give the direct services. We give that number out, the 1-800-273-8255. That's a national suicide prevention lifeline. Here on Long Island, we have 2 crisis centers, both in Nassau County and in Suffolk County, Response in Suffolk County and the Crisis Center in Nassau County. Those are the trained people that handle those calls. So we work with them closely, and we give that number out to everybody. And I tell people, parents, if you're concerned about your child and not sure, call that number. There's trained people on the other end who can answer your questions, who will have resources available if you're looking for a most updated list of therapists or counselors. Those people will have the numbers for you. So I tell people all the time, call the number. Don't be afraid. That's what they're there for. If you have any doubt whatsoever about anybody, any issue, call them. You know, if there's something that you're concerned about.
So is there anything that you would like to tell the audience directly? Now's your time, because we're coming. That was
no, it's okay.
Yeah, it goes
yeah, no,
quick. Yeah.
I am passionate about trying to get the message out that our mental health is just as important as the physical health, that people are not afraid to say when they're not okay, and encourage people to, if you are or know family members who are experiencing mental health issues and you have any questions, use the resources. Go to our website, afsp.org, has tons of information on prevention, outreach and support for people who have suffered loss, and just to, as a society, talk saves lives. Not be afraid to talk about it.
Absolutely, and thank you so much.
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
know you have a walk that's coming up
Yes.
in Eisenhower Park. What day is that?
Next, we have a walk on Saturday in Suffolk Community College and one on May 4th at Eisenhower Park. Those are our campus walks, our college walks.
And they're listed on your
Yes, on our
your
website, all of our events that we have is
And what's
listed.
that website again?
afsp.org.
afsp.org. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Anne,
for
for
having
coming
me.
in tonight. I really appreciate it. And that's our show for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen out there, please share this information. Don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to be mindful, and don't be afraid to be, just that person, that one. And, I mentioned it earlier, the one philosophy, and I'll mention it again. We're a community, and therefore the whole thing is for us to help each other out. We will thrive, we will grow, we will evolve as a society if we care about each other. And when you notice something, just the one little conversation can make a world of a difference. So thank you all for tuning in this evening. Don't forget to subscribe to WLINY and stick around. Well, not necessarily stick around, but tune in next week for Her Talk with Tai Vicari. And thank you again for tuning in tonight. God bless. Bye.